It's February 21st, which means it's my birthday! If you want to help me celebrate, you can like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff. But now let's get into this shit show, unfortunately. What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is What If Season 2, Episode 1, What If Nebula Joined the Nova Corps? First episode in. I have seen some of the review scores for this season, and I know it's not quite as good as the first season, but still pretty decent overall. And from this first episode, that's kind of the feel that I get. It's okay. There's some moments in it that work fine. The overall story is decent. I feel like the mystery itself wasn't that great, but to be fair, it's hard to build up that sort of mystery story in such a short amount of time, and then also have the payoff of her solving the mystery and basically saving the day. Maybe could have spent a little bit more time in this episode, or even stretched this out over a couple of episodes instead of just making it this one. But I realize that's not how they're going to do this. They're going to have each individual story be its own thing, probably until the end of the season. I don't know how all of these stories are going to connect, or if they are going to. I just know from the first season that's kind of how they set it up. So that's sort of my expectation for this season. But just a couple of things that stood out to me about this episode in particular. First of all, the humor. I feel like I remember the first season being funnier than this. And granted, first episode, maybe it'll get better. But there were several jokes that I could tell were meant to be jokes. You know, they had the punchline. You could tell they had a little bit of a pause to let the audience laugh. And there weren't really many that were funny. The only one I remember actually laughing at was when Korg made the joke about the rock, paper, scissors, and it's paper, but it's made of rock, so it's uncuttable. That's funny. All the other jokes throughout the episode, though, were just kind of bland. Korg, kind of the same humor we've seen from him in the Thor movies, but it didn't really land in this. Howard the Duck is a character. It's funny to see him here, but none of what he was saying was really that funny to me. So I don't know why the humor wasn't landing in this one, but I feel like that was something I was expecting to feel more throughout this episode, and I just really didn't. So I hope that improves as the season goes on. But the other thing is the voice acting. A couple of them were fine. The ones I think that are used to voice acting, like Korg, Groot, Howard the Duck, I mean, those are voices that we've heard. You don't really have to act, you just have to voice act. But I do feel like Karen Gillan as Nebula, it wasn't quite believable, and I don't know how much of that is she's used to just acting in front of the camera, so voice acting is a little bit different. It's a bit more difficult to make that transition maybe, but I did feel like some of the acting in this felt a little forced. It didn't really grip me as far as the characters and making them feel like real characters. But all in all, it was just sort of an okay, somewhat enjoyable, but somewhat bland and boring first episode. I'm hoping that it improves from here on. Overall, the feel of Marvel has kind of been sort of bland and boring for most of the projects that I've been watching. So this was one I was hoping, after a pretty good first season, I was hoping to get back into it, and this would be something that I would really enjoy and have a good time with. And from the first episode, signs are kind of iffy. But we'll see where it goes from here. On to the second episode. I'll see you there in a minute. And now episode 2, What If Peter Quill Attacked Earth's Mightiest Heroes? So this one was a little bit better. I think the story overall gripped me a little bit more because it had a nice little message, nice little wholesome moment between Hank and Peter. So it was okay. It was more enjoyable in that sense. Overall, the humor still not really landing, though. Like, there were a couple decent ones near the end, but for the most part, there were several moments where you could just tell. You could tell by the way it's written, by the way it's delivered, the pause after. You could feel they're sitting there going, hey, here you go, here's a joke, now laugh. I'm just not laughing. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just not well written, or if it's just not well delivered, because again, the voice acting in this one was kind of hit and miss. A couple were okay, a couple were not really that believable. So it's a very iffy show. I know that's kind of a pun. What iffy? I'm sitting here talking about how bad the jokes are, and then I make that one. What a coincidence. But I think the biggest problem that I have with this one is the missed potential. Because in the first season, I remember there was a story where it was what if T'Challa had become Star-Lord instead of Peter Quill. And I remember vaguely that episode ended with Ego finding Peter as kind of a young adult, and he was working, I want to say he was working in Dairy Queen. Don't remember that for sure. But I remember that's how that episode ended, and it kind of left it a little bit open-ended. We weren't really sure what was going to happen with that. So when I saw this episode title, I kind of thought maybe they were going to continue from that story from the first season, which I thought would be kind of a cool little thing, you know, building off of some of the stories that we had from season 1. But we don't do that. We just have an entirely new story where it's what if Yondu just actually gave Peter to Ego this time. And I feel like that's kind of a missed opportunity, and especially this episode ends with Bucky, you know, having turned himself around, basically throwing away the Winter Soldier and the mind control that he's gone through, throwing that all away, and now he's just sort of out there. They leave that as sort of a what's going to happen with him at the end here, but I don't feel like I can look forward to that in the future or in maybe for season 3, because we just saw in this episode the Peter Quill that met Ego in the first season. That story has nothing to do with this one, so it kind of feels like that story is just done. It does sort of take away that possibility in my mind, and I think that's something that is a bit of a detriment for the show. This idea that all these worlds exist and all these different stories are going to progress and continue on past what we're seeing. That's why we should care about them, because who knows where it could go from here. I feel like now I don't have that interest anymore, because this story was perfectly set up with the idea of Peter being taken in by Ego. That idea was there in the first season, but they just wrote that off and told an entirely new story. Just got rid of the first season story. I just think that's a missed opportunity. I think that from the audience's point of view, you could really drag us along. You could continue a lot of those stories, or at least a couple from the first season, because there were some that were left a little open-ended, and it would be interesting to see what could we do from there. So maybe it's just a minor gripe, maybe it's just my own personal opinion on it, but I do think that that's something that could have had a lot of potential if they continued with it. But the only other thing is, it's kind of interesting seeing some of these characters that we've not seen or talked about in a long time. In the last episode, we had Jude Law's character from Captain Marvel show up. So coming into this one, we have the pilot from Captain Marvel that was kind of her mentor that died. And then we have Lawrence Fishburne's character from Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think it was just Ant-Man and the Wasp. It was the second one in the series. We have his character, but younger. And there are just so many thrown in there that it kind of gets to a point where I forget who's who. And especially whenever you have a character, Jude Law's character already didn't look that much like him, but at the very least I was able to make the connection. This one, it doesn't look anything like Lawrence Fishburne because it's supposed to be a younger version of him. So I don't know exactly how I'm supposed to know who that is just based off the name, because he wasn't that big of a character in Ant-Man and the Wasp. So it feels weird that they're throwing in these random characters. Same thing with the captain, the pilot that showed up. If not for the fact that she was wearing Captain Marvel's suit or design, I don't know if I would have known that was her. I don't know why they're randomly pulling in these characters, but I guess it does sort of work as far as world building and adds that little extra element for those people who are watching every single movie and TV show. It's kind of a nice little Easter egg, I suppose. But if you're not, I mean, probably really lost as far as who a lot of these characters are, so I would have to imagine that that might be a bit of an issue for some of these episodes. But with all that being said, that's it for this second one, so on to the third episode. I'll see you there. And finally, episode 3, What If Happy Hogan Saved Christmas? Oh boy, when I saw this was the lowest rated episode this season, I wasn't sure what to expect, but this feels like the worst episode this season, at least definitely so far. Not funny at all. And it was definitely an episode that was supposed to be funny. When you look at the setup, you look at how goofy a lot of this is. The idea of Happy Hogan getting a version of the Hulk serum, and he has to stop Justin Hammer from destroying Tony's party and taking over and all of that during Christmas. They make a bunch of Die Hard references. Like that sounds like it has a potential to be funny. But the way that they do it is just not. First of all the Die Hard references are just that. They're just references. They're not done in a funny way. They're not done with a clever setup and a clever punchline. It's just, oh, hey guys, we saw Die Hard, so let's make all these different references. We've got the vent scene. We've got them talking about different characters from the movie. We've got him falling off the tower. It's just a bunch of stuff that, yeah, cool, you've seen it. You're showing us that you've seen it by referencing it, but that's not funny. You have to actually do something funny with it. On top of that, you throw in probably the most annoying character in all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Kat Dennings, whatever, Darcy, whatever, I don't remember her last name because I don't care. She's not funny. Anytime she's in something, she's the worst part about it, at least as far as I've seen. So having her in here, it's not funny. All of her jokes, if you want to call them that, are not funny. None of them had me laughing. None of them even had me chuckling or smiling. I was groaning through most of this episode. The premise itself has funny possibilities, but ultimately they don't really do much with it. It happens exactly as you'd expect. Happy just sort of lucks into getting the serum inside of him, and then he lucks into stopping the bad guy, and then there's this goofy misunderstanding at the end when the Avengers are attacking him instead of Hammer for some reason, and then boom, day saved. There's not really anything interesting. Like when I heard this idea and when I saw the setup, most of what I thought was going to happen happened. How is that fun? To be able to predict where a comedy is going to go, and especially whenever it's not done in a way that is comedic, it just makes it so boring. The worst thing a comedy can be is boring, because then you just don't remember it. And that is the worst insult you can give to any comedy. The voice acting, I'll touch on it really quickly again, because it feels like something's just really off with this season. I don't know if maybe they got a different voice director from the first season, because the first season, it felt like most everybody was doing pretty well. There were a couple that sounded maybe a little bit weird, but for the most part, everybody felt like they were engaged, they were doing their parts well. This season, it feels like maybe one or two sound either natural or sound like their character. Pretty much the entire cast here, outside of, obviously, no Robert Downey Jr., no Chris Evans, and no Scarlett Johansson, everybody else reprised their roles. And none of them sounded convincing. Honestly, out of all of them, Colby Smulders probably sounded the weakest. But, Jeremy Renner didn't sound like himself at all. You got Kat Dennings, she did sound like herself, but that's probably the only one that sounded normal, and it's just because she was as annoying as she normally is to me. But Jon Favreau didn't sound like Happy in this one. So I don't know what's going on, but this season has not started well as far as convincing me that a lot of these guys are the characters that they're supposed to portray. You've got Sam Rockwell back as Justin Hammer, and he just did not sound anything like I remember him. Honestly, I thought he was trying to do like an Owen Wilson impression, because it sounded more like Lightning McQueen than it did sound like Justin Hammer. None of the voice acting is sounding that good this season. It's very concerning in the first 3 episodes that I'm already having that feeling, because now I'm not excited to hear anybody else for the rest of the season. On top of all of that, the Christmas puns were just painful. There were some that didn't even make sense in a lot of the scenes. There were so many that you would think at least one would land. And I think the only one that I remember getting a slight chuckle out of was whenever they started referencing A Christmas Story early on. And it was just because the one guy brought up the whole, like, isn't this, you're talking about a Christmas movie that we all know. It was just, the setup for it was kind of funny, and then having one of the henchmen add on top of that got a slight chuckle. It wasn't really funny, but I found it a little funny. Everything else just wasn't. Hammer was making Christmas pun after Christmas pun after Christmas pun. None of them landed. They were all stupid. It just felt like the writing team was just thinking, oh, if we just throw in these little Christmas words into normal everyday sentences, that's enough of a Christmas pun to get a laugh, right? There was no actual intelligent thought put into any of them. So I really don't know what happened with this episode, but it felt pointless. It felt like it was not just a normal waste of time. It felt like the episode itself, the entire writing staff, the directing staff, all of them, it felt like they all just wasted their time. They just goofed around, realized, oh crap, we haven't written anything on the final day, and then just wrote this shit script together and just tossed it as a screen. Or, more likely, they just plugged it into an AI and said, hey, Christmas puns, Die Hard references, Christmas jokes. That seems just as likely to me, because this feels like it was just a bunch of references and jokes with no real thought put into it. So all in all, first 3 episodes, I'm not really as invested in this season as I was in season 1. I think the idea of what if you needed to do something kind of clever with the second season. You had to add something that the first season didn't have, and so far it kind of feels like we're almost taking away in some aspects. Because a lot of the ideas that they had in season 1 were kind of unique, something that maybe some people have thought about. They thought about the idea of what if it was Peggy Carter instead of Steve Rogers. They thought about what if some of these characters were in the superhero roles of other characters. Like, there were some clever ideas there. With this, it sort of feels like now we're just randomly throwing these characters together without much sense. Again, the Peter Quill being taken in by Ego, that's a good idea, but they lacked the potential that they had from the first season, taking that story and continuing it on, and they just sort of gave us a whole new story with a different basis. So overall, the ideas for this season have not quite been as strong, and I feel like that's where it's kind of losing me. And it's disappointing because, again, What If Season 1 was a clever idea that really captured my attention and my interest. So I'm a little worried that the rest of the season might be pretty poor based on these first 3 episodes. But who knows? We'll see what's going to happen next. But with all that being said, those are my thoughts. So let me know down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3 episodes? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future What If reviews. Also check out the channel. We have a lot of other reviews on there as well as some Let's Plays. So check those out if you have time. But until next time, hope you guys have a great day. And I'll talk to y'all later. Peace out.